Hello, friends. I'm Abby from Abby's Bookish Life, and today I am here with my beautiful friend Danielle,
Hi.
and we are going to be talking about The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. And
So good.
yes, I'm so excited to finally talk about it. Danielle and I have had it read for like a couple weeks now, so it's time to talk about it. And like last time, this video will have spoilers. So if you haven't read the book and you want to read it first, go read it and come back to see what we thought and see if you feel the same. But if you don't care about being spoiled and you just want to listen to some conversations about books, please stick around because it's going to be a good one. So Danielle, let's start with what you thought about the book overall. What are your thoughts?
I really loved it. The last book I read was not my favorite, so this having a book that I really enjoyed afterwards might have made me like it even more. But the way that Chloe Benjamin laid out the book, I really liked that there are four main characters, and she kind of chunked it into each character and their arc, and I just liked the way that she laid the book out. I felt something to connect with every character.
Yeah, I loved all of them.
Yeah, so that I really enjoyed it. I would 10 out of 10 would recommend.
So for those of you who don't know, The Immortalists is about the Gold family, and it's four kids. It is Simon, Clara, Daniel, and Varia, and they, as children, go see a fortune-telling woman who tells them the date that they're going to die, and then it kind of splits off, and that happens in the prologue, and then it splits off into four different sections of the book, and each one focuses on a different sibling, like it's from their point of view. So I also loved it. It was different than anything else I've read, which was cool.
Yeah.
And I also spent the whole time like wondering if people were going to die when the fortune teller said they were going to, and like then trying to figure out like if the fortune teller was right and what is happening. And
when I think that was a big part of the book is, was she right because she guessed it, or did they die because she said that they were going to die that day? It just,
yes.
And as we talk more about it, that'll make more sense. But
yeah,
it was just really interesting.
I also loved all four siblings, and really their significant others. Like I just genuinely liked everybody.
Yes, they were good characters.
Yeah, and like even characters that I didn't like at some points like made a reappearance later, and I liked them more. So of the four siblings, were there any that were like your favorites?
I liked Simon and Clara best, I think. And maybe it was because we started with them, so I felt like I knew them more, or since I heard their story first, I was more drawn to what happened to them and how they affected the others.
Well, yeah, because their stories continue into the other siblings as well, because they talk about bringing them up.
Well, and then in the prologue, I kind of was leaning towards Varia because I'm the oldest of three, and you feel that kind of protective nature that she felt when they were going to the fortune teller. So I was like, oh, this girl, like I get it.
I have the same, because Varia is like, she's described on the back as like the bookish one, and I was like, ooh, me.
Yeah. That's me.
But yeah, I think Simon was my favorite, and his was the shortest, which made me sad, but I think he kind of like got me really invested, which I think it was smart to put Simon first, because then the rest of them, I was like, okay, well, wow, now that I know what happened to Simon, like I need to know what happened to the rest of them.
Exactly.
And they come from, so let's start with Simon. So the family comes from like a small Jewish family in New York in the 60s. And Simon is like the golden boy. So he's supposed to be like, stay at home with mom. He's like the youngest.
Gonna take over the family business.
He's ready to take it over. So his story to me like fully shook me. So he decides to run away with his sister and go to San Francisco at 16. And then you find out that he's gay, and he becomes like a male dancer at this like nightclub, and he becomes a ballet dancer and like is really successful.
I loved the ballet twist. I didn't see that coming, and I loved that.
I loved it. I loved Simon. And I loved Robert, who is the guy that Simon falls in love with. And then it also brought in like race, which felt very like timely.
Yes.
Because Robert, for those of you who haven't read it, Robert is a Black gay man. And so Simon and Robert kind of bond over being gay in the 60s. And Robert does point out a couple of times, like, well, you don't experience the same discrimination that I do. And
like, yes, we're both gay, but you are white, so it's different.
Yeah, and there were like some protests going on. It hit very hard, and I felt very emotionally connected to that story, which maybe is why we felt so connected.
That could be.
It's because it was so timely.
Yeah, very poignant in this day.
Yeah, I loved him, and obviously like the whole gay crisis or the whole AIDS crisis for gay people in like the 80s started to so
Simon got AIDS.
He got it before there was even a name.
Didn't even know what it was called. They were like, "Oh, he has the flu, like this gay flu that everybody is getting."
Cancer.
And gay cancer they called it. And then it turned out it was AIDS. And
of course you're reading it now like, no.
I'm like, no, I know what's happening. So when he went in the prologue to the fortune teller, he was like, oh, young, I'm dying very young. And the fact that he decided to go with Clara to San Francisco and like San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
And like live his life to the absolute fullest because he knew he didn't have a lot of time was, I think, my favorite take of all the characters and how they chose to spend their time.
Yeah. So then
whether it ended up being true or not. You know,
he did die on the date that the fortune teller said. But and of course Clara was like, this is my fault, like I brought you out here, and he was like, no, I knew my date and I came with you because like I wanted this, and like I would not have lived, like if I died on this date at home, like it would not have been the life I wanted. And so that was the first time though where I was like, ooh, wait, but did he like, was it the self-fulfilling prophecy where he knew what date he was going to die and
lived it up the best he could?
Lived it up, and like even
though then if he wasn't so promiscuous, like maybe he wouldn't have died on that day.
Right. So it's very like, oh, it was so interesting and gave me so much to think about. And I still, even after I finished the book, don't know what I think about whether the fortune teller was right. So
I know, same.
I don't know. Okay, so then we have Clara. So Simon dies. That's how the first section ends. Then it goes to Clara's story.
Kind of backtracks a little to fill in some gaps and then kind of moves past Simon's death and how she handles that.
Which I like, because I was a little worried that when it went from like this date and then immediately after, that it wouldn't give you any information about what those people were doing, like what the siblings were doing while Simon was doing that. But it did, so it was great.
Yeah, I like they filled in some holes and then kept pushing it. Yeah.
So I think my favorite thing about Clara is that she's an unreliable narrator. She's like drunk a lot of the time, and she believes in magic and believes in ghosts and thinks that Simon and her dad are like sending her messages through knocks on the wall. And she, of course, is like trying to be a magician.
Yeah.
And like weird stuff is happening where like she's actually doing magic that she is like, I have no idea how I turned this thing into a strawberry. Like I just did it.
That was so funny.
So I was like, oh shoot, is magic real? Like, wait, what is happening? And then you realize that she was drunk half the time, and you're like, oh, is magic real, or is she just so like grief stricken and like depressed and using a lot of alcohol to cope and is seeing things that she wants to see?
It was really
fascinating to me.
She was fascinating, and just her free spirit, but like her wonder about everything and just her belief about that anything could happen. And she fully believed that this fortune teller was real and what she said was going to happen, especially since Simon died on his day. She was like, oh, this is real now. Yeah.
Well, and I also love, so like Simon's story brought in like some race discussion, some like LGBTQ discussions going on. and also a little bit of politics because they were talking about like the AIDS crisis and like that kind
They
of
brought
stuff.
up like milk and like,
Yes.
you know, how all that was going on.
Yeah. And then Clara's story definitely, for me, felt more like a feminist piece. Like it was more like men can be the headliners for magicians and the women are the assistants. And like she's trying to like buck that tradition because she's the one who, like, it's her dream. And
Exactly.
she's like trying to get her own act and like she's doing it on her own. And of course, she like falls in love and starts a family and they become like a little magician team. But I definitely think that like hers was very much like a piece on feminism, on grief, on alcoholism and like addiction. So I love that each different section has like a different
Focus, kind of.
focus and like societal issue that should be talked about in it. Like that was something I didn't expect and that kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, because each one really touches on a
Something.
different issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think, how did you like her husband?
Okay. I liked him at first.
Yeah.
I thought they were really cute together. And I like that he, along with like a lot of the other characters we see, they like travel through the different sections. So like she met him in Simon's section and then he pops back up in hers. And I really liked him. And I was like, yes, they're in this together. And then towards the end, like towards the middle of the book, I didn't like him at all.
Same.
But
Like
then,
I felt he was really pushy.
yes, and he
like trying to take her thing and make it his thing.
yeah, and he also seemed very like, well, I believe in you, but like I think you're crazy and like I don't believe in what you believe in.
Right.
Then at the end, like he has that whole thing, he has that argument with Daniel and he's like, you weren't there. Like nobody in her family was there for her but me. And like I was the one who had to like make sure she stayed alive and like tried to get her to stop drinking and like tried to get us a better life. Because then you're kind of seeing from his point of view, like he was not necessarily trying to be pushy, but he was like, they had a kid and he was trying to like make an actual life for them without having to give up magic. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about him.
Yeah, I same way. I kind of went in and out whether I liked him or not. But I did like, because in the middle and in the beginning, we really only get it from Clara's point of view.
Yeah.
Her relationship with him and how he's acting. So to have that piece from him later after she died was really.
Yeah.
Oh, and the way she died, I was sobbing.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
I was broken. And then I was like, what just happened? Because
it was unclear at the end of her section what she actually did until they talked about it in Daniel's section.
And also I find it very fascinating that she's like, well, this is the test to see if the fortune teller was right. I'm going to try to kill myself on my date. And if it works, then she was right. And like that, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And that was the moment where I was like, oh no, is everything that's happening like Simon calling out to her and like sending her messages and like all this stuff, her doing actual magic? I was like, is that real? Or was that all part of this like depressive, grief-stricken episode and like alcohol-driven moment where now she's like, all right, let's test it. Let's do it. When she thought she saw the fortune teller on the street, like outside. And I was like, wait, do we get
Could it be?
But no, she's just like, I think that her section was written to like make you feel like these things were actually happening and then discredit her completely and be like, wait, but actually like you thought she
might have just been crazy.
It's like she might just be a little bit out of it. But yeah, her death made me cry. And then
when she dropped off her daughter at the nursery and was like goodbye, and I lost it because I have a 15-month-old and I could never imagine just like, okay, bye, I'm gonna go like test this death theory I have now. Like, no.
When she doesn't like really say goodbye to Raj, she just like he's like, okay, see you at the show. Well, and
Well,
then
do you think she resented him then at that point, and which is why she was like, don't
I
care,
think
not gonna tell him?
I think that she knew he didn't believe her
Mm-hmm.
and was like, you know what? I'm going to test my theory on my own and like I'm going to prove him wrong. And if this happens, then like he's wrong and
Yeah.
I win. So I think that she knew that if she had said something, he wouldn't have let her do it.
Yeah.
And then that would have defeated her idea of like testing this theory.
Yeah.
So, but then the other part of her death, you hear somebody calling to her. Like she shuts
Oh,
herself in the room and somebody is like, Miss, are you okay? And then she can hear them like trying to get in and like calling out her name. And so you're like, well, they know her name. So I'm like in my mind trying to figure out who it is because they don't tell you.
No, and I thought maybe it was like someone who's like getting her to get to the show, like checking on her to make sure she's ready.
Yeah. Or like maybe the like nanny or the babysitter who she like dropped the kids off with was like, that was a little weird. Maybe I should check on her. But and then I was like, maybe it's Raj. But the person kept saying Miss. And I was like, no, it's not Raj. So I was very confused. And then they tell you later that it was Eddie, who we haven't talked about Eddie yet, but Eddie was a cop in the first section.
Yeah.
And he kind of like roughed Simon up a little bit. And
because he was gay. And was like, yeah.
And so he like roughed him up a little bit and like was not kind to him at all. And Clara was like, back off. Like, that's my brother. And Simon does mention that there's like a weird tension that happens in that moment. And I was like, I didn't think about it again until Eddie pops back up in her section and is like, hey, you've inspired me and your magic is like changing my life.
Yeah, like I'm low-key in love with you because you put me in my place all those years ago.
Yeah. And then he like kisses her and she pushes him away and is like, no. And he like continues to try to kiss her. And I'm like, Eddie,
maybe don't.
I almost liked you, but now I hate you again. But now we're back. But yeah, and so Eddie popping up in like everybody's story was kind of unexpected and like crazy for me. I was like, whoa, Eddie's back.
So yeah, he just like he just saw her, right? And was like concerned, like, why is she going up there? Followed her to the room, was knocking on the door, couldn't get in.
Yeah, so
and then because he was there, ended up taking the lead on her investigation to see if it was suicide or something else.
Yes. So that leads us into part 3, which is Daniel's story.
Yeah.
And so Daniel's story is when like the story of the fortune teller comes back up. And Eddie shows up and is like, hey, I'm investigating your sister's death. And like, do you know anything about this fortune telling woman? And so then it like starts to feel like a crime novel. And I was like, oh, okay.
I'm here.
Let's figure out who this lady is and like what's happening. And at this point, Daniel is like I would say he's like 40s is kind of like what I imagined him as. And I feel like his and Varia's story like really went quickly. Like you don't get a ton from them.
Yeah, you don't delve into their like personal life as much. It just kind of tying them up a little bit based on the first two.
Yeah,
they lived definitely a more safe life though. Daniel and Varia. You know, Simon and Clara took a little more risk.
Yeah. Well, and you did get to see Daniel like his like falling in love moments with his wife, because he's the only one who has like a traditional romance where like he falls in love with a Jewish woman and like they decide to get married and they have a Jewish wedding and do their most like have a very like normal life, although they don't have any kids, which I think is interesting. That
because what's his wife's name? Myra,
maybe.
Myra. She couldn't have kids, and Daniel at first was like, "Oh, that's a bummer. Like I would like that, but loved her enough to stay with her anyway."
Yeah. Well, and I think the themes of the book are kind of like you live on through your family, which you can see like as each section goes on, the characters are still continuing. And the fact that they don't have any kids, and that Ruby, who is Clara's daughter, is the only like child that comes out of this family. Well, so far, she's the only child that comes out of this family. And like she's the one carrying on the stories. And even then she's so separated from them that she isn't like part of the Gold family when the story like picks up at Daniel's section.
Yeah.
It was very like he was talking about how they couldn't have kids and he really wanted them, and I was like, ugh.
Oh, I know. And then when Ruby and Raj were visiting and he felt like he really bonded with Ruby, it was really like touching.
Yeah, and I just kept thinking like, oh, like it makes me sad. But although I do like that they had a character who couldn't have kids, and it wasn't her who was, it wasn't like a stereotypical story of a woman being like, I can't have kids and I'm so heartbroken and like, what are we going to do and how are we going to get through it? It was kind of just, when they got married, she said, I can't have kids and I've
made my peace
terms with that. And like, I think that there are lots of other ways we can like live our lives without having children, and we can, you know, continue on without kids. And it didn't become like a huge thing in their marriage. It was just like, yep, that's the way it is, which I don't think is often like portrayed.
No, yeah, because she found out really young. She was like 17, and she's like, you know, I found out so long ago that I've come to terms with this. I'm not sad about it. Like I've already, there are other ways I can live my life. So let's do that.
Well,
are you on board?
It easily could have been Daniel being like, oh, well then I don't know if I want to marry you. But he doesn't even like, he's a little bit sad, but he doesn't hesitate on it, which makes me happy to see that in a book where it's not the main focus is the fact that she can't have kids, and everyone's like, oh, sad, like no, a woman can't have kids,
God forbid.
I know. And like nobody like, and then I kind of expected, because Daniel's mom is like a very classic like stereotypical like Jewish mother, like overbearing, wants to be involved in everybody's life, that kind of thing. And so I was like, oh, she's gonna come back and like be mad. Yeah. But then she wasn't. And I was like, yes, okay.
She kept surprising me throughout the book.
Yes, Gertie. Especially because like, as kids, they're like, Gertie is so overbearing and like we have to sit still and like do this and that and we have to help with chores.
Right.
And by the end I was like, Gertie,
this poor woman lived like a tortured life.
Honestly, she is just like, Gertie's really struggling. And I kind of wish we had like an epilogue that was from Gertie's point of view to be like, let me tell you my story.
Here's how it was.
Well, because Simon's, I don't think we mentioned this, but Simon's story starts with the Gold's like dad dying. So like Gertie's husband dies on like the
second page. Yeah.
It's very unexpected. It's like he has a heart attack in the middle of a crosswalk, even though he was very, very healthy and like had just gotten a checkup. And so
dies. Right,
you know. Which I do think that was kind of like the stimulus for everyone else being like, oh, death is real and like we are not immortal and we know what day we're gonna die, and so now we have to like start making choices. And like
exactly.
And since Clara and Simon had the two youngest dates, they were the ones that were like, bye, we have to get out. Like we have a life to live. It messed me up. So Daniel makes it his mission to find the fortune teller, because now there's like a full FBI case going. And then Eddie tells him, hey, like we've discovered that there's no foul play really with your sister's death. And so we're not charging the fortune teller. Like she's good to go.
Yeah, off the hook.
Off the hook. And Daniel becomes furious. And of course he already, like this was right after Thanksgiving, and he had just had this like really political argument, which I think was the like thing with Daniel's story was politics. Because he was like the guy, his job was to make sure people were fit to become soldiers. And this was in the middle of the Iraq War. So it was right after 9/11. And he was basically like mass producing soldiers for the army, and his boss sends him on leave because he's like saying that people aren't fit to be soldiers, and his boss is like, no, you need to pass everybody. Like, we need
we need bodies.
And so I think that and his discussion with Raj about like politics and about privilege and that kind of side of it was really interesting and was like his part of it. So he gets in this big fight with Raj. It's like, I'm over this. My death date is in like 3 days. And like, I'm not going to let this woman control my life. Like, I'm not worried about it. Yeah. I don't think she's right. I'm going to go find her and
confront her
and make her apologize for like making, because at this point, Daniel thinks Simon and Clara both died because they thought they were going to die. Mm-hmm. And so he's going to go confront her. And then that ends in his death on the death date.
Yeah, he finds the fortune teller like in her trailer, like in the middle of nowhere in Ohio, like so close to where we live.
Wait, that got me. So I just have to throw this out there. I got so pumped because they were like, she's staying in a trailer somewhere near Dayton, Ohio. And I was like, whoa!
Yeah, she was in West Milton. And she's like talking about the exits or the cities he's passing. I'm like, oh yeah, been there.
Know that? They're naming like random small towns on the outskirts of Dayton, and I'm like,
Yep, I know I see your path.
Yes, I can see where you're going. I can tell you exactly what highways to take to get there.
Yeah. So he just like finds her in her trailer and like confronts her and is like holding her at gunpoint, like, say you're sorry. And who should arrive?
Eddie Donahue is freaking back. He is always there, and he shows up and is like, Daniel, you're making a mistake.
Remember me?
You're being dumb. Well, and then I don't understand. Daniel's so adamant, like, you have to apologize to me. And it's like talking to her. And so this woman is estranged from the rest of her family, who are known as like traveling fortune tellers. Mm-hmm. And he's like, what is wrong? Like, why don't you stay as part of your family? And she's like, well, they use their magic to swindle people. And she's like, I have a gift that I want to use to help people. And she's like, that's why I didn't charge you guys as kids. That's why I don't charge now. Like, if you don't have something to pay, like, I don't.
Like, that's okay, because I'm not a criminal like the rest of my family.
Right. And so then I was like, wait, she just straight up said that she had, like, at gunpoint, she was like, hey, I have magical powers. Like, rather than being like, you're right, I like totally made it up and I don't know why this coincidence happened. She's like, yeah, I have a gift.
Yeah, like stuck true to herself. It's like, yes.
And I was like, oh no, and at that point I was like, oh, Daniel, it's his day. I was like, something's gonna happen.
So because it was his death day, he was like doing it, like, I'm gonna confront her, I'll kill her if I have to. Yeah. It doesn't matter because I could die today anyway. Like, might as well get it over with. And then turns out that he wouldn't drop the gun on the fortune teller. So Eddie comes through and shoots him, and it ends up being a fatal shot, which wasn't his intention.
I know. And I honestly, the chapter ends with a gunshot going off, and I was like, oh no, because either Daniel shot the fortune teller or Eddie shot Daniel, and you assume, because the chapter's ending, that Daniel's gonna die. And they don't talk about what happened until like a little bit into Varya's chapter, where they
I'm like, are we just not gonna talk about this?
I'm like, wait, did he die or not? And so it turns out that Eddie tried to shoot him in the thigh and accidentally like hit a major artery, and he bled out like within 10 minutes. And I was like if he had dropped the gun, like, it wouldn't have happened.
I know.
Or like if Eddie had shot differently, it wouldn't have happened. So like the fact that Eddie wasn't even trying to kill him and he still died on that day was a little bit where I was like, oh, she might be right.
Right.
So then it goes on to Varya's chapter, which was completely different than I expected it to be.
Yeah, when it started, I was like, wait, am I in the same book? It felt the writing style seemed different.
Yes.
But
and hers was probably my least favorite.
Yeah. At the beginning.
Yeah, towards the beginning. And then once it like really got into it, I was like, oh, so much is happening.
Yeah. So she's like a scientist, which I thought was interesting. And was that they all had such different, I guess Danielle and Varia, because Danielle was a doctor, kind of had similar. Yeah. But she like made it her life's work to like find cures for like rare diseases and like try to extend the length of your life.
Yes.
Because all of her siblings died so young. And in the beginning, it tells you that she's going to die at, 88? Yeah. So she's like, okay, like, I'm good with that. Yeah. So she made it her work to kind of extend life for everybody else.
Yeah. And I thought that was fascinating. I also thought, so, like, Clara named her act the Immortalist. Yeah. And basically was talking about how like magic can make you live forever and all this stuff. So definitely the idea of like being immortal or like challenging mortality is through the thread through all of them. Mm-hmm. And so Varia is definitely like, she's studying monkeys. She's like, I'm going to find these cures. Like, this is meaningful work. And she also has OCD, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah. Like extreme.
Yes. And I definitely like picked up on it towards the beginning of her chapters, and then she like said it explicitly, and I was like, yes, there it is. Yeah. But the fact that she works with monkeys, like she's very, like she's trying to put herself out there and like do something that makes a difference, even if it makes her uncomfortable. But she definitely at the beginning of the chapter like hasn't pushed herself beyond like the limits at all.
Right. And she's kind of experimenting on herself too, because the diets that she's given the monkeys and whatever she's also doing. So it's like, even though she knew her date, she still wanted to like ensure that she made it there.
Right. Well, and I also think that she was trying to make it past it, which, because she was, you know, kind of like like, I don't really believe the fortune teller. Like, I think that it maybe was a coincidence, but then the fact that she was like doing these diets, even though she knew from the fortune teller that she would live to be 80 something. And she's like, well, I want to live to be like a nice old age. And I was like, she believes in the fortune teller. She's trying, trying to get past it. But yeah, so her chapter took like weird, like big twists and turns for me. Yes. Because the rest of them I was like, okay, yeah, this all like makes sense. I knew the characters by that point, but the other characters don't talk about Varia very much at all.
Mm-mm. She's very much a mystery, and she kind of keeps to herself too.
Yes. Which makes sense. But at the beginning of the chapter, she's talking to Gertie and says something like, well, she knows like my 2 biggest secrets. And I was like, oh, what are those?
Please elaborate.
Yes. So her chapter, Varia is like working in the lab, and this guy comes up and he says he's a reporter, and he's like, I'm going to do like a little journalism piece on what you're doing here. And at first, I don't know if you got this, but at first I was like, is she about to have a romance with like a really young guy?
I thought he was hitting on her at first. And then I was like, what's happening? He's very young.
Yes. And I thought that they were going to like have a thing. And then when it takes a turn, and all of a sudden he's like, I'm your son. And you're like, what?
Because Varia's like not married, lives alone, has no kids. Like,
well, she has OCD, and like when she meets him, she shakes his hand, and then she's like, mentally, I remember that it's my right hand, and I need to wash it later. So it's like she's very clearly like uncomfortable touching other people. So the idea that she would have a child out there in the world somewhere. And it's not like this doesn't sound bad, but it's not like she's a man who could have like fathered a child and never known. Like,
right. Like she knew this could happen.
Like she fully knew that she gave birth to a child and like he was out in the world somewhere.
Yeah.
And like we don't hear about it until he shows back up.
And then it turns out that Gertie knew about it.
Yes. And then I was like, oh, she hid it. That's why we haven't heard from her. She was like secretly hiding.
Yeah.
But no, Gertie knew about it and like helped her through it and was fully supportive of her like giving the baby away. I mean, she like fought her on it and was like, are you sure you want to do this? And she did. Yeah. But then the part that messed me up the most was Luke's story about his brother. Because Luke shows up and is like, I want to know why you left me, like why you didn't want me. Like,
right.
I want
to tell me about you. I just want to know about your life and
yes.
my
and
family.
So when she won't let him in, he's like, okay, let me tell you a story about my brother, which is his adoptive brother. And so he used to play this game, a game where he would run and hide to see if people would come find him, basically like abandonment issue stuff.
Yeah.
And so he did that once while his brother was in like a grain silo because his family lives on a farm, and he was supposed to be watching for his brother to make sure that nothing bad happens. And of course he runs away and hides, and he finds out afterwards that his brother suffocated in this thing because it started to fill and he wasn't there to watch for him, and his brother was trying to get out to come find him.
Oh yeah.
It was rough. It was
devastating.
I was like, no. Well, and then Varia's response was like, please leave.
Yeah, she was like, okay, cool, bye. She was
very like, which I think
she was angry at the way he tricked her into being let into the lab. He was welcomed, and she was like showing him everything, and then he was like, oh, boom, you're my mom, tell me about it. And then she was just pissed off, like, how'd you get in here?
So upset about being tricked. Well, and she also, like, since we're seeing it from her point of view, she's like, I feel horrible that, like, she feels bad about the way that she's living her life and embarrassed because, like, it's not what, I don't think it's what she imagined. And, like, this was what she wanted to avoid a child being part of. And he kind of forced his way into her life. And I don't think she was ready for that. I don't think she wanted that. Yeah. But they do make amends, and, like, that was sweet. And they send each other, like, postcards and little gifts. And
yeah, so they end up having a nice little relationship.
Yeah, and I thought that was a sweet thing to see, was, like, that reconciliation, because really none of the other characters get a reconciliation like Varia does. She's connected to, what do we say her name was? Myra?
Yeah.
So she's connected to her. She, like, talks to Eddie O'Donoghue, like,
and then she meets with Robert later on.
Robert comes back. I was like, yes, Robert is back.
I loved Robert.
I did too, and I'm glad. I kind of thought that he was going to be gone, but that's what I loved about Chloe Benjamin's writing, is she, like, managed to bring it all back together.
Yeah, she, like, tied up all the loose ends really nicely.
Yeah, and so, and you can see at the end, like, Gertie is kind of getting older and starting to fail, and then she and Varia have this beautiful discussion where they talk about, like, how uncertainty and, like, not knowing the future is, like, the fun part, and how she shouldn't give any, like, weight to this fortune teller, because the best part of life is just being uncertain, and, like, anything can happen anytime, and, like, let's just live our lives. And
yeah, I like that she ended up telling Gertie at the end, like, we all went to see this fortune teller.
Yeah.
And then she asked, you know, like, what was your date? And she was like, 80, whatever it was. And she was like, okay, like, that seems good. Like, you should just be okay with that. And it was interesting to me that the other three were so interested in, like, living their life and packing it as much as possible. But Varia, because she knew she had more time, was very, like,
she, like,
almost didn't do anything.
Yes. Oh, and I wrote down a quote. I'm going to find it because I know it's in here. Oh, so Luke, Varia's son, says, the point is that you have to live a lesser life in order to live a longer one. So he comes in at the end and is like, everyone else lived their lives and they died earlier because they were, like, really fully living, but, like, you are living a lesser life so that you can live a longer one. And he's like, that's not the point.
It's not the point. Yeah.
And so I like that they had her who was like, I have a really long time, so I'm just gonna like not do anything, like basically stand still. And
Play
it
it safe and
very safe. And I do think that her discussion with Gertie and like her talk with Luke, by the end of her chapter and like by the end of the book, she's like ready to live.
yeah.
She's like, okay, I've given up enough of my life to this like fortune teller woman and like this prophecy that we're gonna die, and like I'm ready. Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
do something.
Well, and I liked that they didn't end her section with her dying. It was left open because there's more for her to do. And it kind of gives her that option to go out and do and live a full life, what's
Well,
left of it.
and it also gives you a chance to still wonder, like, was the fortune teller right? Because if they had shown her dying at that age, it would have been like, okay, so the fortune teller was right. But now it's like she could die whenever. We don't know.
We don't know. She could die tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. So I liked the ambiguous ending. What did you think about like the last little section? It's like one page, but it was told from Ruby's point of view.
Oh, I don't remember that.
It's like the last part of Varia's chapter.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I liked that. Because Ruby kind of got glossed over and kind of tossed around, and like,
yeah,
because she was living like that traveling performer childhood, like, and she just wanted more out of her life, and it made me have hope for like that she would break out of that trend that her mom and dad were in, and that she could go.
Yeah. Well, and I think
she really wanted.
Right. And I think she embodies something from all four of the siblings, which is something really cool. It's like she wants to be a doctor like Danielle, and she's very like bookish like Varia, and she's like, I want to go live my life like Simon, but she's also a magician like Clara. And it's like and if you look at the idea of this book as being like a love story about family and like how you connect over time, like she is carrying it all on. Like she is the one who's like, I'm the future of this family.
Exactly. Which is where the immortal thing comes into me too, because they live on through her. Yes. And even after they've died, they can, like, their memory will live on because they all are part of her too. And they've all affected her in some way, some more than others, but.
Yeah. And just the idea that your family continues on after you're gone and like keeps your name alive and like keeps talking about you is just so beautiful. And it's all of the characters probably would have loved to live forever, and like they don't get to know that they kind of are.
Yeah.
It was just a beautiful I was kind of like, how's this book gonna end? And then when it ended with Ruby, I was like, oh, I get it. Like I get the whole point.
That was a good move.
Yeah. Just some really great writing.
It was great writing. I loved it, and I would like to read more from her.
Yeah. Yeah. It mentioned in the back that she wrote another book, The Anatomy of Dreams.
Yes.
And so I would like to check it out because it's another like, it says a young couple was pulled into a controversial sleep study, fueling a deep mistrust between them and revealing the immense uncontrollable power of our dreams. So it's like, this one's about magic, that one's about dreams.
I'm into it.
Yeah, I really am. Yeah, I just think that this was a great book.
I loved it.
Yeah, I felt connected to every character. Every chapter took twists and turns. If you're watching this and you haven't read it and you just got spoiled, I still recommend that you read it because
agreed. There's still a lot more twists that we didn't even get to.
I know.
It was so captivating all the way through.
Yeah, and I wanted to, like, I read each like sibling section almost in one sitting. Like I would open it and be like, okay, let's start Clara, and I'd power through.
Yeah.
So it was really, really good. My last question, the only thing we didn't talk about, would you want to know the date that you're going to die?
No, I don't think so. I'm very much of a planner, so part of me is like,
you'd be like, okay,
oh yes, if I know I can fit this in and get all my ducks in a row. But no, I really think there's a reason we don't know. And I don't think you should know that.
Right.
Because look at how it affected their lives, for good and for bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I feel the same way. And like this idea of knowing your death date is not new in books, but a
right.
lot of times it's done in like a sci-fi way where it's like they have a watch that counts down and tells them when they're going to die, or like
Right.
somebody can like look at you and tell you when you're going to die. But this was a very like, it's a normal family
Yeah.
who everything about their lives changes because they know the dates that they're going to die.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, what I want to know? No. But then that makes it feel even more like, well, since I don't know, I guess I better like live my life because it could be.
Well, and like Luke said, you can't live a lesser life just to ensure that you live a longer one.
Yeah.
So live it up.
Live it up. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Danielle, for being
Thank you for
on my
including me.
channel and for talking about this book with me. It was a great one. I'm happy that we picked it.
I loved it. I'm
Yeah.
in anytime.
All right. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, friends.